With the news that Brian Michael Bendis is leaving Superman, either earlier than expected or as expected, and the news that he was going to be on for a while was wrong news, who knows? You decide. Where does Bendis go from here? Let me explore a couple scenarios of what could be happening next. As total prediction town, we'll see. Hey everybody, this is Perch. The news that Brian Michael Bendis is off Superman and Action Comics, what feels like earlier than expected. He's ending his run in December. We already have Young Justice kind of come to a conclusion. We don't know about Legion of Superheroes. It's still kind of hanging out there. In theory, that comic is still going, but I wouldn't be surprised if that title kind of wraps up as well. I don't know. Where does Bendis go from here? A lot of speculation everywhere, and I think that let's do some ourselves. So, breaking this down logically, there's a couple routes. So, route number one, the timing of all this, Death Metal ends in January, the 5th to be exact, and there will be some level of new DC after that. DC Universe in 2021 is going to be a different place. So, where does Bendis wind up? Well, assuming that Bendis moves to another monthly title, the most logical places are Justice League or one of the Batman books. But I think the Batman books are probably unlikely, and I say that because Tynion is having a really good run. It's a run with strong sales. You've got Sean Gordon Murphy over on White Knight, and he's continuing that run from what we can tell anyway. And both those books look like they're in fairly stable hands. It doesn't feel like DC is going to want to come in and mess with that. And the idea of bringing in Bendis to take over, say, Detective Comics while you leave Tynion over on Batman just seems unlikely. It doesn't seem like they would do that. Now, we have heard that the new DC is likely to put more emphasis on Batman. If Bendis is one of DC's top writers, certainly kind of in his profile, his prestige, and I would assume his pay, then you would assume he'd also be attached to Batman if they're leading with that best foot forward. But again, it just doesn't fit. So Justice League becomes the most likely target where he'd wind up. You still get to do some things with Batman. He probably has at least some claim that he made the Avengers really strong while he was at Marvel. So this is the DC equivalent to the Avengers, the Justice League. So those pieces would all fit. Justice League doesn't have a writer as far as we know. And so, a Bendis run Justice League in January feels like a natural fit. Except the sales for Bendis's work at DC weren't exactly stellar. And so, you look at that and you go, I don't know if you're going to see, will DC want to have a writer who struggled to pull in $60,000 a month on Justice League? Is that going to be what DC wants? Now, granted, I suspect, and maybe nobody wants to hear this, that isn't exactly the way that DC is going to be looking at this. The new management's not going to be looking at Comicron numbers distributed through Diamond or rather Lunar and UCS. They're not going to be looking at those as the litmus test for what's going to work or not work in the future. They're going to want to put their best foot forward. They're going to want to have titles that are appealing to a wider audience, maybe wider distribution, and so they're going to really think about things in terms of that. I just don't think that they're going to be carefully analyzing who sold what. I think they're going to be mainly looking forward and say who can sell in the future. What's the earning potential for these books? So my feeling is that if he does go on a book, it would be Justice League. I think that's the safest bet. You could also say that we've got Flash that needs a writer. We've got Aquaman need a writer, but another name that is now back at DC and with Bob Harris out, it seemed only natural and like it would happen, is Mark Waid. Mark Waid is writing something for Death Metal, and it really feels like Mark Waid is about to do more with DC. Now, Mark Waid's long ambition is to do Superman, so that could be a very likely candidate for who's going to take over that book. Mark Waid could also go to Flash. He, of course, has a long history with that character, so that's floating out there as well. So certainly DC could put Bendis on, lower tier writers. They're not going to mess with Wonder Woman at the moment. Tamaki is doing a run that DC seems at least confident on, or they like to keep going with. So that's not going to happen in January. So that leaves, now you're down to Green Lantern. That's a possibility. Aquaman, maybe. But it doesn't really fit against somebody with the profile of Bendis. So, what does a world look like where Bendis doesn't have a monthly comic? To me, that's starting to feel like the most likely scenario here. That we're going to see Bendis take the approach of maybe the Tom Kings and the Scott Snyders of the world, and he's going to be put on black label books, prestige type formats. He's going to be really both, intended to do what's currently going on with Three Jokers, write 2 to 3 stories a year that are highly profiled. They're limited series. They're designed for easy consumption monthly, but also through trade. And that's how they're going to use Bendis. I think that that's most likely. And I say that for a couple reasons. Number one, again, assuming he's one of the higher paid people at DC, this is a way for them to really both control their costs and also kind of steer him towards some more prestige projects where, they're not signing up for a monthly commitment. I think his name does have some weight in terms of comics and graphic novels. So that's also probably a way to say, look, you're going to come in, you're going to do these special, black label 3-4 issue limited series type things. We're going to put them in trade paperback. We're going to market your name. That would also make sense. And now Bendis has brought in a number of people from his network, including The Fraction, Kelly Sue DeConnick, G. Willow Wilson, and others that kind of are within his bubble of influence. And so I think that it's those are the kind of the people that may get steered toward the monthly books, and Bendis would be doing these high profile things. That seems possible. There's also a very, very small chance that DC aims Bendis at being some level of kind of more editor or curator role, similar to what Jonathan Hickman's doing over at the X-Men, where he's not an editor, but he's kind of curating this line and working with people in that respect. However, there's enough kind of background noise about Bendis that he's not well loved within editorial. That he's maybe not the best team player when it comes to some of that stuff, and so that starts to also feel a little bit unlikely that they'd put him in a role where he requires more coordination rather than less. I don't see that either. So again, I think where we're back to save money is that kind of middle option. I see Bendis being placed on some special projects at DC, kind of 3-4 issue limited series. I think that DC likes what they've seen out of things like White Knight and Three Jokers, Doomsday Clock, Last Night on Earth, those kinds of things. I think you're going to see more of those type of titles coming out from DC. I think it's an easier thing for them to market and wrap their arms around. And I suspect that's where you're going to see Bendis kind of land, is stuff like that. Now, there's also a possibility that throughout all this chaos, Bendis exits DC and makes his way somewhere else. So where would he land if that was the case? Well, a lot of people will say Marvel. He'd go back to Marvel. It's not clear if Marvel would accept him back at this point. And I don't say that from a, whether they like him or hate him. I think Marvel's going through their own cost cutting, their own kind of mechanisms. And, Bendis left on quote unquote good terms with Marvel, but typically it's hard for you to come back to Papa Disney if you left it, at least in this quick of a turn. So I don't think it's an easy route for him to get back there. I think that there's at least enough control, enough lack of funds, enough things going on that it would be on multiple fronts. And I think with Bendis as well, I think from his perspective, I think it would feel a little bit like the tail's between the legs and he's kind of crawling back to Marvel. I think that's how it would come across. And the question would be, where would Marvel place him? I think that Jason Aaron is, still on the Avengers and is still working that run. It feels to me like Donny Cates is clearly the heir apparent for the top book there, if Avengers is their top book, and kind of doing some level of deal there. I think that Marvel is going to need to do something with the Avengers and that family of titles, similar to what Hickman has done with X-Men. And I think it's only a matter of time before Aaron's run wraps up and they do that. I just don't think it's Bendis that would be helming that. I think it would be somebody else. So if he leaves DC, then I think Bendis is in the world of doing creator-owned, not crowdfunded, but maybe some stuff through Image, and just I think that he starts to go that route. Bendis had definite ambitions to go into Hollywood and start doing some of those projects. Maybe this is a chance for him to do that, but the current climate at Hollywood is really not there for doing these kinds of books. So if we take a giant step back and we look just strategically, I think that Bendis is in a bit of a tough negotiating spot. I don't think he has the best grounds. We've seen now, there's proof of what he's done at DC. Now, granted, I said earlier that, I don't know that the new management of DC is going to be heavily looking at Comic-Con and the numbers to date, But there is enough evidence, there's enough platform there to say, put Bendis's name on a book. It's not a surefire seller. It's not guaranteed there's going to be success. And I think 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, that was how he was billing himself. That was kind of the aura that he had, is that you can come in and just kind of fix things. And I think that mystique is gone to some extent. So some of that bargaining power is eroded. I think looking at the new worlds of DC and with Marvel and how corporate control is kind of taking over there, we at least have some evidence. It is a known secret out there that Bendis struggled when they were having the Marvel Creative Committee with Disney in terms of giving suggestions up to the movies. That's a well reported, kind of well known story, and I think that haunts him a little bit and follows him. So I don't think he's necessarily in the best place to negotiate the amazing deal. But that said, he has a name. It's got some value. He can certainly do some things crowdfunded wise. I just think the smart money is likely that he's still at DC. He's doing one-off projects, and that's most likely what we're going to see. But maybe I'm wrong. That's my guess anyway. What's your prediction? Leave a comment below. Let me know where you think Bendis winds up, how it all kind of maneuvers throughout all this, and what you'd like to see. And by the way, what you'd like to see and what you think is going to happen are often two different things. So let me know both. Hey, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe. Love all the subscribers we've had to the channel. I think we almost passed 6,000, or maybe by the time that this video is posted, we will have passed 6,000. So really appreciate all the support you've given me, always. And most importantly, thanks for listening today.